All right, so tonight we're going to go over miniature porcelain portraits and why are they so collectible? And these are antique, by the way, these hand painted portraits. How to tell if you have a real one or one that is just basically a print, or if it's a like a transferware decal. This particular one has a artist signature. That always helps to let you know you have the real deal. And this one comes in a really big ornate frame, but the porcelain plaque itself is very, very small. So not only will you come across miniature paintings on porcelain, you'll also come across them on ivory, on mother of pearl, on something called vellum, which I think was some kind of like goat stomach lining or something like that. You'll come across them on paper. Yes, gouache, watercolor, all sorts of different types of materials they were painted on. And we're going to find out, well, how do you find out who the person is in the portrait? If it is untitled and you have no clue whatsoever who made them and who they are of. Now, not only did they come on like in frames and to be hung on the wall or little like porcelain uh, or ivory or miniatures in frames to place on a tabletop, they also came in jewelry form as well. So you can find a lot of them in brooches or pendants, even little placards on bracelets and all sorts of things, rings. And trying to figure out who the subject matter is sometimes easy and sometimes hard. So generally what I do is I have an Android phone. Now, if you do not have an Android phone, you most likely will not be able to do this. But what I do is I take a picture of the portrait, and what I do is I click a button that says lens, and it's in my phone, and it's a Google type of face recognition software. So what it'll do is it'll actually look for all the images that match this. Now, you got a 50-50 shot. Well, actually, like a 40-60 shot that it won't actually work. Because if you have like a miniature portrait like this, they'll show you hundreds of other kinds, similar, of miniature portraits of all different types of ladies. Sometimes it hits right on the head, the nail, hits right on the head, because it'll actually be a famous image and by a famous painter, and right away, boom, you know who the subject matter is and you know who the artist is. So how can you tell what it's painted on? Well, I'm no expert, but what I've come to know is if there's a backing on the frame that it's in, well, if it's set in a piece of jewelry, generally won't be able to take it out and try to investigate. But if it's in like a frame with a glass little panel covering it in the front, generally in the back, you can actually wedge it out of there, and gently, by the way, very gently, because you could bust the glass and you can actually break or damage the portrait. So what you can do is take it out and examine it. Sometimes you'll notice, oh my goodness, it's on a piece of paper, like a thin wafer of cardboard or cardstock. And then you basically got something called a watercolor or gouache on paper. And that's very common. Or you'll find some like little ivory colored disc. And yeah, I gave it away. And you'll see little striations and lines in it, and yellowing. Like it's not a perfectly white colored little piece of medium that they painted it on. And generally, you do have ivory, which is bone, a very, very thin wafer of bone. But there's a but. During I think in the 1850s, 1860s, some person created something called celluloid, which was to mimic ivory tusk. It didn't get popular until somewhere around like the 1880s, 1890s, and then most popular during the 20s and 30s and early 20th century. They would have painted it on a piece of celluloid, which is white, like an off yellowish white, with little striations in it, much like ivory. Very hard to tell them apart unless you have a discerning eye. After a while collecting these things, you get to know that is celluloid and not ivory. Now, actually, I'm trying to think. Porcelain. So, of course, porcelain or pottery is easy to tell. It's really a no-brainer, whether it's on pottery or porcelain. But then again, not everybody knows. So I'm going to show you what porcelain looks like. Now, again, this one is gouache. I believe it's a watercolor. Don't know if I could show you close enough, but I believe it's a watercolor on cardstock. And let's go over the details of this picture. Okay, so I have it laid out on a paper towel because I don't want it to get scratched up. We have our Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass. Don't know if that's going to work. It's really not going to because of the glare above us. And that's the problem with these things, these glass panels. So let's zoom in and try to look close. And you can generally see it's like almost like a watercolor. Watercolor, actually, that's basically what watercolor looks like. You will see, yeah, little striations and stuff. That's actually from the cardboard, those little dots. This does not mean it's a print. But you will see, yeah, you see this is hand-painted strokes. That's another thing. Look for hand painting. Generally a print, you will notice thousands of dot matrix dots. And you might say, well, this has dots on it. But there is a big difference between a print and one of those pieces of paper that's cardstock. They would have these little ripples or little dots in them automatically. And then when they paint over it, you will see a rumpled or rippled effect like this. And you can clearly see that this was actually hand painted. Let's get in there closer. And you can see the painting. And of course the glass is making it much harder to see. But let's check out, there we go. You can see the various brush strokes going through this piece. That's another thing, look for brush strokes. You can see the swirling of the different background color done by hand and possibly watercolor. Here we go. You can see the paint marks right here, which is brush strokes of the paintbrush. And let's get closer to the face. And you can generally see there are brush strokes all throughout this piece. Okay, so which one do you think is the impasta? And not impasta, like we're not talking about macaroni over here. Okay, impasta. I'm sorry, I have a bad New York accent. Out of these two, oh God, of course the glare makes it harder. Which one is it? The one on the left that's there impasta, or the one on the right? Study it carefully. Okay, it's the one on the left. And so the one on the left is actually a print. Now hold on. So if you look at this from far away, this looks really good. But this is antique. It is not a reproduction. By the way, there are a lot of reproductions out there, and I'll help you find out and figure out which one are the reproductions. There was a revival for these pieces going on into the 30s, then the 40s, then the 80s. These actually really, they come back all the time over the decades. So if you look closely, this is, I believe, Marie Antoinette. Now look very closely. From first view, you're like, no, this is fine. But there are thousands. Let's try to zoom in here. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of teeny tiny dot matrix. And of course, my camera is being a douche. It never wants to actually zoom in. But there are thousands and thousands of teeny tiny little dot matrix dots going throughout this piece. And if you look really closely, you will see those dots. There we go. You see that? Those dots, each one makes up a color. And if I can only get my hand to stay steady, hold on. Let's go over here and take a look at this. I'm just going to lean this up this way one moment so we can try to zoom in and try to see what I'm talking about. So if you look, you'll see thousands upon thousands of teeny tiny little dots of color. And you see this especially in this area, but you really got to look close, and you really got to like inspect it. Let's actually lay it down this way and try to see that. Okay, you see in her hair, right around here, look at that. Look at those teeny tiny little dot matrix dots. Her face, look at it. It's made up with thousands upon thousands of dots. Now do you see that? Now you know you have a print on a piece of paper. Look at her eyebrows. You can clearly see that above the creases of her eyes, throughout her hair. and there is not a brush stroke to be had on this. So this is just generally a print on paper. So even though it's a print on paper, it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. You see this very, very old frame. This is probably from the mid 1800s, perhaps about 1850s to the 1870s. We see this gorgeous French laurel wreath hanging little piece right here. So you can hang it on your wall. It's made of some kind of filigree material. You can actually see through the metal pieces going around it. You see leather covering the back. This wasn't cheap. And you see, like I said, the filigree work going throughout it. And you see right there, we got a crease right in the paper or a tear. Aha, that really helps too. Look for tears in the paper. Okay, so you see this beautiful, beautiful Marie Antoinette, and you say, oh my God, but it's a print and it sucks. And it's worth nothing. Nope, not true at all. I sold one like this, almost identical, in my Etsy shop for I'm not kidding you, $225, even though it was a print. And why did someone pay that much money for it? Because the frame is just absolutely astonishingly beautiful. It's French, and it actually really looks nice, and it is antique in its own right, so it does have value. So we got our porcelain one here. Now this one's a large one, but the actual picture or the portrait is not large, but it came in a large frame. Generally, these come in teeny tiny frames. So this is an oversized piece. Now, how can you tell what country of origin? We'll look over the clues. So what do you see here? That the signature is E. Dietrich, or Dietrich. And who generally has the last name of Dietrich? Well, a German. And the Germans were actually known in the Dresden area of Germany to make these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful placards made out of porcelain. They had wonderful, wonderful porcelain factories in Germany, not only in the Dresden area, but companies such as Meissen and loads and loads and loads and loads of different German porcelain manufacturers. But KPM, I can't pronounce what the whole acronym stands for, but KPM is known for their plaques. They made the most exquisite porcelain portraits in these frames. Now, I do not think this is a KPM, but you never know. I have to do research on E. Dietrich and find out if he was actually a painter for KPM in Germany. But also another company that you might want to look for these porcelain portraits that are done on plates, on vases, on beautiful, beautiful porcelain, and not just miniature, would be Royal Vienna of Austria. And Austrians were also known to do this as well. These were made in Italy also. These were made all over Europe, especially France. French manufacturers of porcelain, such as Lamages and Sevres, S-E-V-R-E-S, don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, were known to make gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous portraits on porcelain. And sometimes, though, you can get really, really screwed. And you can end up getting a piece of molded plastic that's actually a reproduction that looks like it's porcelain. So you're going to have to look really carefully, and you really can see that this is china or porcelain. But make sure you have to be careful. Back in the 50s, a lot of times during the 40s and 50s and 60s, furniture stores used to actually sell these type of like fancy ladies in frames, and a lot of them were made in Italy. Now, a lot of people think they have antiques, and they were actually prints on porcelain or transferware on porcelain of these fancy type of opulent ladies, but sold just for the decorating market. So you have to be very careful. Look over the clues. How old is the back? You can clearly see this is very, very, very old with the old backing on it that I tried to remove to get more information out of. That's really not a problem on value. But also look at the materials they used to hang the picture. If you see anything with Phillips head screws, you know it was from 1932 and after. So it's not an antique. Also, look for square-headed nails. If something is actually like in a wooden frame with square-headed nails, or nails that are not uniform, like say the nail head is not perfectly uniform, you know it wasn't machine made and mass produced and is old. So here's a very, very old example. Now, the portrait miniatures that people really, really, really want to add to their collection are from the 1700s to the early 1800s to mid Victorian. The earlier, the better. This one is really quite unique. It's two twin ladies. They look like Madame Pompadour, Madame du Barry, Madame Lamballe, or no, Princess Lamballe, Marie Antoinette, Madame Pompadour. I'm trying to think of all the names of these royal noble ladies. And I believe that this is one of the king's sisters. I think it was was it King Edward the Third or one of them? He had daughters, and two of his daughters were around the same age and prominent figure. I'm sorry, figure prominently in a lot of these early paintings. The two daughters together, there was three, but the youngest one was so small that these two were like bosom buddies, if you know what I mean. So if you look very closely, you could see the brush strokes going all throughout this piece. Now you might be like, well, what is it painted on? Look at the brush strokes on this. You can see the blush cheeks. Very, very great. I'm looking for an artist name. I think it's very, very illegible in that spot. But this is actually really, really old. You could see the puncture marks or the breakage in the glass. That's quite common in a very, very old frame with like a top that looks like a pocket watch. It's really quite cool. But if you look now, I'm going to move it through the light. You see the rippling. You see that like throughout the piece. I believe, and I'm not an expert, I believe this is oil on card. And because when I took it out of the backing, and it has a very old backing, it was on card. It was on some kind of a card stock or card paper or some kind of thick antique cardboard material. But if you look closely, you do not have a print. Let's check it out. Okay, so how can we tell? Remember what I told you about this, about the little tiny thousands of dots of color? Well, let's zoom in here and take a really good look. And if you look, that rippling that you see there is actually not indicative of a print. That actually, when I took the cardboard out of the back, it had ripples in it, in the cardboard itself. So in the person, you can see the raised brush strokes here. When the person painted this, they painted over that rippled paper, and it gave it like this rippled effect going throughout it that looks like ivory, which is quite cool. And you can, again, see, look at the lipstick or the lip color, the rouge on the cheeks. This is all entirely hand painted. My guess is this is from 1800 to somewhere around the 1830s, 1840s. I could be incorrect. I'm no expert. But this one is very old. Now, value-wise, which one is the most valuable out of all the ones I showed you? This one. And of course, because people really like the ones that fit into the palm of your hand. That is the ones that people go for. So these are the things you need to stay away from. Anything, and thank goodness a lot of them are marked with a sticker on the back that says Cameo Creations. And I'm going to show you some pictures that might really fool you. You're going to be like, oh my God, this is the real deal if you come across it in a thrift store. But the truth is these are not. By the way, this is a 1960s reproduction. You got to be very careful. Here's Cameo Creations. And these were very, 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 actually, these are flooding the market, flooding thrift stores. They're everywhere. And people are selling them for really high prices, but it's really not worth this. Now you see these portrait miniatures and these beautiful antique looking frames. But the truth is these are not antique or portraits that are actually hand painted at all. So let's check out some of the pictures. And these are generally prints, and it's hard to tell by looking at it, but thankfully on the back, you'll see this, a cameo creation, Miss Linley by Thomas Gainsborough. So basically these are copies of original antique paintings. Now these actually will fool a lot of people. If this label falls off and you find something like this in a thrift shop, you might be like, oh my God, I just hit the miniature portrait lottery. Now, they made them in all different kinds of frames. They even made them, look at this one, with all multiple portraits going around. Now, that looks really antique with a mirror right in the center. You get these type, you get these type, you get, look at this, a whole smorgasbord of them. Be very, very careful because you might spend $200, $300, $400 for this without the label, because somebody could unscrupulously take the label off the back of it and sell it as an antique. Some of them had velvet going around them. Some of them were actually, like this one has velvet as well. We have round ones that are in round frames. Actually, they look quite good from far away, but they're not what you think they are. Now here's the Italian ones I was telling you about to watch out for. So here's other ones to really stay away from. So you're like, wow. And these are the Italian ones I was telling you about. A lot of times you'll see the famous paintings, Pinky and the Blue Boy. And these actually look pretty good. They're in really ornate frames. But these were made in the mid-century by by Italians for furniture stores for decoration. And you see the Made in Italy stickers on the back? Well, guess what? They fall off. And then people sell these as original antiques. And here are a whole shitload of ones that you'll find that look very, very, very old. And these are Italian. And here we go, right here, 22 doll hairs. And some people do know what they are. Here we go. We got even ones with flower prints on it. So just be careful when you're looking for these things, especially in thrift shops. You find a lot of these in thrift shops. So I forgot to mention, you'll find a lot of these painted, actually not painted, but printed on silk screen. So it'll be actually on a piece of fabric. Let's try to blow that up if Etsy will let us, because Etsy is slower than shit. And yeah, they distort everything. Hold on, we gotta wait because Etsy is an asshole. Etsy asshole. Etsy is asshole. And you can see this is on fabric. And also, they did them on paper too. So be careful, because you're going to think, definitely, like, wow, this is antique. You'll see it in a thrift shop. And guess what? The Made in Italy sticker is not on the back anymore. And look how old this looks. How tarnished. Just like my antique ones. They actually distressed them to make them look antique. So again, some of the clues can really help you, like the artist signature, E. Dietrich. Well, guess what? E. Dietrich worked for KPM, and I can't believe it because an original KPM porcelain plaque is worth a heck of a lot of money. I've had this hanging on my wall for years, not knowing this. So here's a KPM Berlin porcelain plaque signed E. Dietrich. Oh my goodness. Wait till you see how expensive these are and the value on these ones. Again, here is the painter E. Dietrich, one of his works on KPM porcelain plaque. And by the way, he made large porcelain plaques as well. And it's pronounced Königliche Porzellan Manufaktur, KPM. And yep, we got Dietrich over here sold. Well, how much did it sell for? How much do these sell for? Before we do so, let's make sure our signature matches up, and it does. Well, he'll be a monkey's uncle. Here's another KPM. By the way, they copied on porcelain original paintings from original artists, and they did their renditions of it in these beautiful gilded frames. Asking price sold. Well, someone made an offer, but it has to be close to the offer of $16,500. And mine is tiny though. In the frame, this one was 16 by 21, and you can see mine is much smaller. And so this Dietrich painting for KPM, by the way, a small vignette in the center of this velvet and gold gilded frame, sold for $12,000. This smaller Berlin or KPM porcelain plaque sold for $1,300 by Dietrich. And Dietrich wasn't the only painter for KPM. They had a multitude of painters that would paint these plaques. Oh my God, exquisitely. So now you can only imagine how much more excited I am now after seeing this. Oh my goodness, look at that. That is just beautiful. And again, by our KPM artist. Now, some of these artists actually did their own pieces outside of KPM. They didn't only paint for KPM. They painted their own pieces as well, had them framed and sold on their own as well. And this one is just absolutely exquisite. What would I put a value on this? I have no clue. Since I haven't been, actually, I tried to take it out of the back and I was unsuccessful. I did not want to actually move the nails, the original antique nails, to pull this out and take a look at it. I don't know, but I wouldn't sell this for less than, even though, it's seen better days. It has some staining on the fabric, and some wear patterns on the fabric. It's just yellowed from age. I would probably not sell this for less than $500 because it is in a nice large gilded frame. And you can see, yeah, this is a really, really beautiful frame. And it's wood, by the way. And it's gilded wood. And you can see this gorgeous, gorgeous ornate detail going around it. But this is just really an amazing discovery that I just made. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. When you go into thrift shops, do not, and I repeat, do not get those ones that are like Cameo Creations or the ones made in Italy. They're virtually worthless. I mean, you might score one for $5 and then be able to flip it for maybe $20, $15, $30. If you get a whole set, you might get 50 to 80 for them, but nobody really wants them. Well, anybody who collects antiques doesn't want them. The only ones that do want them are people that are just looking to decorate their house in the old school style. Thanks for watching, and so long.